Whether it be a trivia night or an argument with your buddy at a barbecue, knowing capital cities can be a source of pride for all of us. When asked to name Australia's capital, most people are tempted to say Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, or maybe after 3 wrong guesses, Perth. Strangely, their capital is actually a city most of us don't know exists. Canberra. Because capital cities are supposed to be the center of nations, it's strange that many unknown cities have been chosen. Historic capitals like Paris, London, and Rome were the heart of huge empires, with the largest populations and economies of any city within their country, and it makes them easy to name. But in more recent history, capitals haven't been so obvious. Newer countries like the United States, Australia, and Canada didn't choose their most prosperous cities to be their nation's capital.
You're right, Henry. It's almost exactly the same in France as it is here, although they play the game a bit differently.
Canada very intentionally chose not to make Toronto or Montreal or even Quebec City our capital. So why not? And why did Canada settle on a city that many people outside of Canada have never heard of? To answer that question, we have to go back before Canada was even founded. Before Canada became the unified country we know today, each of our provinces operated independently. This divided approach had to change when the United States marched on Canada, eventually burning down the provincial legislature of Upper Canada in York, now called Toronto, during the War of 1812. In order to defend against this American threat, the 2 largest provinces were fused into one province of Canada. The new parliament was a controversial unification of Upper and Lower Canada. Although their flags were completely identical, their politics were not. The new legislature was comprised of 84 members, 42 from Upper Canada and 42 from Lower Canada. But they still hadn't agreed on a place to house this newfound Canadian Parliament. The decision to equally divide the seats, regardless of the population, was all part of an attempt to avoid favoritism to the English or French province. This same no-favoritism approach to choosing a capital made it extremely difficult. For years, Parliament repeatedly moved across Canada, first to Kingston, then Montreal, then alternated between Toronto and Quebec City until 1856. This system clearly wasn't going to work, and the government of the time sent repeated requests to Queen Victoria to select a new capital for her province of Canada. Many cities made bids. Of course, Toronto, Quebec City, Montreal, and Kingston each made their own bids, but were joined by much smaller cities like Cobourg, Ontario, who also threw their hat in the ring, building massively expensive town halls that put them in crippling debt and still stand today. But none of these cities were chosen. Eventually, Queen Victoria settled on a tiny town of barely 16,000 people that wasn't the center of Canada by any definition, but was the perfect compromise. Although some have speculated that Her Majesty chose the city based on a fondness for landscape paintings from the area, Ottawa was chosen for 3 vital reasons. Firstly, the new capital was far from the American border. Canadians still feared another attack from the US and wanted to prevent another one of their capitals and parliaments from being burned to the ground. Ottawa was also situated perfectly on the Upper and Lower Canadian border, and had a population that was an exemplar of French and English unity for the time. Finally, Ottawa's seemingly greatest weakness, its insignificance, was actually its greatest strength, seeing as it circumvented the issue of having to choose a French or English powerhouse as its seat of government, avoiding favoritism entirely. Although the exact splitting of seats between Upper and Lower Canada would eventually cause complete deadlock in the House of Commons, with either province refusing to agree with the other, this issue inspired the Fathers of Confederation to expand the province of Canada in order to break up the standstill. This idea to include other provinces led to the Charlottetown Confederation Conference in 1864, the year we attribute to the founding of Canada, and began to form the country of 13 provinces and territories we have today. As the number of provinces grew, so did Ottawa's importance. Over time, it surpassed many of its previous contenders in population and economic growth, becoming the center of our country we know and love today.